Hi techies, great to have you guys here once again. So welcome to the second part of creating tab functionality with React portals. So from the last video, we started off by creating basic tab functionality, right, in the simplest way in React that switches between the profile and notifications pages, right? So today we'll be doing the same thing, but using mainly portals, right? So yeah, let's get started. Yeah, so before we get to React tab functionality, let's take a look at how portals actually behave in React. So over here, what I have, I've introduced a new component which is called boxes example. Not sure why I called it that, but from what we see on the left-hand side of the screen, we have a bunch of boxes which are basically made from like the grid, CSS grid, and we have like a yellow dot, right? So the idea here is quite simple. All we want to do is just portal the yellow circle, right, into one of these boxes. And in order for that to happen, I've created a component, right, that just basically does that. So what we have here is a portal child component, and I'll show how to implement this in a bit. But for now, all you need to know is it's a component, it's a React component, it's a functional React component that takes in a target, right? So the target is, okay, where do you want to move this, right? So in case you don't know what this is basically our yellow circle, right? This over here. So we're just basically going to say, oh, we want to put this yellow circle, we want to put out this element into one of the boxes here. And I think I'll just basically identify one of the boxes from the DOM, right? So I'd go to my inspector, select, and pick any of these boxes. So yeah, I need to zoom in a little bit here. So what's happening, or what you can see here, is we have a bunch of boxes, right? And each and every one has like a unique ID. So we have ID of box 4, we have an ID of box 5, and all that stuff. So whenever you want to target an element, you have to specify the ID of that element. So right now I'll go back to the code and I'll type 4. So since it's the ID selector, I prefer to add the hash, kind of like the CSS selector vibe. And yeah, let's basically save and see that. So yeah, so this is the fourth box, and simply because it starts its count from 0, so that's 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4, right? So if I was to do box-0, would see that and save, it's portaled to the first box. Now if I inspect the first box and I expand the contents, I can see that dot, the yellow dot, right inside of that box, right? So that's basically how portals work, right, in a nutshell. All right, so it's time to actually implement the portal child component. So for starters, I'll just take out this import statement, right, and would have to create a new component called the portal child, right? So it's basically going to have the same behavior as the original portal child. So yeah, let's just get started. So yeah, so for starters, we just basically know from what we see here, this component takes in two props. So the first one is the target, and the second is the child, right? So this is more TypeScript related stuff. So I'm just going to like define the types for those props, right? If you do JavaScript, you shouldn't really worry about this because it doesn't apply to you. So the next thing is, well, now we have the props. We could just basically return the child for now. So what I'm doing is just taking the child and just returning the child. So if you don't know what a child is, this is the child. If I don't return anything, you won't see the yellow box, right? So whatever we place in here is the child. Not sure why I can't see high. Okay, it's over here. It's just like really small. So there it is. So whatever we put in the React.Portal child, that's exactly what we'd see. That's exactly what we'll get back. So yeah, so the next thing is In order for us to actually do the portal bit, we'd have to import the utility from the React DOM. So it is called create portal, right? From React DOM. So this is not a package in React per se, right? I don't at the moment it's specific to the DOM, which is a web, which is for the browser. Yeah, so we create a portal here. I've imported the utility. So in order to use it, all I'd have to do is call it, right? It's not a component, it's just a function. And what it takes in is 3 arguments, but only 2 are important. So what I'll do, the first argument would be the child or whatever you want to portal. In this case, that would be the child. The second argument would be a target element. So the target element is not our target, because our target type is set to, we're expecting a string, right? So what we'd have to do is reference an element. So if you don't know what an element is, it's basically sorry about that, it's basically one of these guys, right? So we have like the footer, we have the div and all that stuff. So in other words, just the same way we had to specify the ID of the element we want to put all the contents to, we'd have to do the same here. So what I'll do now is, please ignore the errors on the from the web, from the browser. What I'll do is just reference the element. So if you don't know how to do that, what you'd have to do, you have to get the element from the DOM, right? So for me, I prefer to use document.get .query selector. You could also do document.get element by ID, but I guess it makes sense to use ID in this case, but I often prefer to use the selector, right? So after doing that, the selector takes in a selector, and what we're passing in here is basically a selector. So when the query does the query, it actually retrieves or finds that element in the DOM, and that is exactly where we want to render the child. So what I'll do next is just return whatever the create portal utility returns instead of the props. Yeah, so the target container is not a DOM element. So yeah, this basically means that the target container is not a DOM element. So whatever where our target element is, there's a chance that this may return an element or null, right? So we're just basically going to check to see what it returns in our console, right? And I'm pretty certain it should be null. So I'll hit the refresh and I'll check again. Okay, yeah, so it's null, meaning it's not finding that. So there's a good explanation for that, and that is quite simple. The element doesn't exist just yet, right? So in order for us to get this bit of functionality working, we'd have to wait until every component is mounted, right? So what I'll do here is, for starters, I'll just basically check if it's null, right? If it's null, then we're not expecting to see anything, right? So what I'll do next is refresh, and okay, so the error is gone. So we should only see, right? We can only portal the child or the children to an element that exists in the DOM, right? So at this point, the element doesn't exist, right? So how then do we ensure that it exists? Well, there are possibilities, right? But what we'll just basically look at for now is wrapping it in a use effect, right? So we want to be sure that all the DOM elements are or all the components are mounted before it does like the thing. So yeah, so it basically means I would have to move this functionality all the way into the use effect, right? And automatically it's no longer in the function scope. So one way to resolve this, or the only way to resolve this in my opinion, is by setting a default a state, right? So we'd have to set a state. The default type would be null, and what we want to store there is a HTML element. So once again, if you don't do TypeScript, you shouldn't really be bothered about this. So what I'll do next is move this. Yeah, so if this is null, then we shouldn't see anything. If we do eventually find the element, or if we don't find it rather, then I'm sure I want to show a warning, right? Unable to find target, right? And the message, I think I would just basically have to specify the target property, or reference the target property there, right? So in a case where we do find it, all we simply want to do is just set it to state, right? So when it's now in our state, oh, it just is element, so I don't think this needs to be HTML element. So when it sets it in the state, then obviously this would resolve, this conditional would be false, right? Because we found the element we're looking for, and what we'd have here is the output. So you can clearly see over here the dot is in the first box. So that's basically how simple it is to implement the portals using the create portal utility function. Yeah. So as an extra case, right? So in a case where we actually provide a selector that is, say, an invalid selector, right? Say boxes 1, right? We should get like a warning in the console stating that it's unable to find the targets, which is like boxes 1. So that's basically what this section over there is for. So yeah, I think that is basically the end of the portal child implementation, right? So you could definitely, the source code is in the description, so you could visit and you could reference it there to see the full implementation. But yeah, this is a basic idea. All right, so now it's time to actually implement the tab functionality. So it basically means I'd have to like collapse this, and I guess we'll just basically stick to this our portal implementation. So I'll collapse that as well. And the next thing we have to do is get our layout back. So this is the component that would be rendered when the page loads. So I'm just going to change the reference. So down here I have the original layout from the last tutorial, right? The first part. So I'm just going to reference that. So that would be what we'd see when I refresh the page. So yeah, same old guy. We have the section for tab buttons, and then we have another section for the tab contents, right? Not much happening here, right? But we definitely see that there are IDs as before. So we have an ID now for the section, and we have an ID for the content boxes. So what I have here is a TED box that was introduced. So it's kind of like the other ones. It's this one over here. So this is actually where the elements would be rendered, right? So this is where they actually ought to be rendered. So what I'll do is I'll just uncomment one of them. So I have like the profile content, as you can see. The profile content is now in this box, which is the actual parent box, right? So same way, we're just going to portal this guy, the content specifically, using our portal child component into, and then we set the targets to this section box. So the ID is content, so I'll just basically fill that the selector. So from what we see here on the right, it's now portaled into this section. Now in our code, it wasn't in that section, it wasn't meant to render there, right? But now it's actually rendered there simply because we're taking the contents or the child of this component, which is the portal child, and we're portaling it. We're just saying, oh, render the child in this target, right? So in other words, that's like render this component in this target element. So yeah, that's basically what we see, right? So I could also do the same for the notification content as well, just to demonstrate that. And yeah, we should definitely get the same result if I set the target to be content as well. So from what we see here, both components are rendered directly in here, right? So I guess I could also introduce the others. Um, so I could say, oh, let's put some button, the button we had there before, which is like the profile button. Um, yeah, so we had like some state and all of that stuff. I am just going to, I'm going to take this out for now, so I could demonstrate how we portal the buttons. So for the buttons, we had profile before, so I'll just type all that out again. But the target would be different. So the target would be a nav here. So I hope button is imported. And why is it complaining? Can't find button. All right. Okay, so it wasn't imported. So yeah, so here we have it. Our profile is in the nav, right? Its original parent is this. That's the main parent, but somehow during rendering, not somehow, we know how that's happening now. So it's been ported to the tabs container. So far so good. We've seen that implementing the React portals is actually quite simple at heart, right? It's all you have to do is provide a target and decide what you want it to render in that target, and it just basically gets the work done. Just by simply using the create portal utility and doing some checks, right, to ensure that the target the target element actually exists, right? So on to the next part. Hopefully I've been able to demystify the idea around portals, right? And hopefully I believe you've been able to like get a better understanding of how it works, right, from the demos. But now what you've seen so far is not how I would actually implement it, right? So that's basically what the next demo would be about. All right, so back to presentation mode. What we have here is a working version. It's not working actually. So we just basically moved the button and the contents to their respective targets, right? Now, ideally, what I actually want to achieve at the end of the day is have a component that contains all the profile, both the profile button and also the profile content, right? And that's basically what I'm doing at the moment. So yeah, so I'd have the button placed in here, right? And I would also have the content just beneath the button. So that's basically the idea. Now if I duplicate this, this is supposed to be for the notifications page, so I'll practically do exactly the same thing here, right? Now I could also choose to do all of this because I'm presetting it won't work without those, right? So let me just do that right now. I'll clean up everything in a bit. A few moments later. Why are you so off? Where's the issue? I think it's somewhere here. All right. Oh yeah, found it. Okay, so yeah, we basically have this, right? And if we simply render this and we also render this, we should see both contents at the same time, which kind of like feels really weird if you definitely look at this. But I think I'm just going to take this box out, the third one, and then I'll do this. So what we see here is the contents, right, which is this, is actually sent to the to the contents section, right? But the button isn't, so that makes sense simply because it's not wrapped in this. So yeah, this actually works as expected right now. So we have the content rendered in the correct position. So if I uncomment this, right, I just zoom out a little bit, we could also see that the same is happening for notification as well. So we have like the notification button and also the contents here. So what this pattern basically brings is, how do I put it, the ability to group related contents, right? They're meant to be rendered in different sections together. So this is a lot simpler and cleaner, right, from my perspective, than the first implementation, which had to do with having like the button separate from the actual content, right? So this is basically how you do the portal stuff. Now we've not added state yet, and that's basically what we do next. So for us to add states, we had to keep track of the tab state before, right? And in order for us to know that the active page and the one that isn't active, one way we could do this, so ideally I would use context. I would use the React context API for this, but just so it's more transparent and doesn't feel like magic, I'll do it like using props drilling. So what we have here is we're going to introduce a state for both sections, right, to tell when they're active or not. So before now, what we had was notifications, right? So if the current tab rather is notification, then notification is active. If it's profile, then profile is active, right? And then after that, we're also going to introduce a handler function for when the buttons are clicked. So let's say on click or on switch, doesn't really matter, but I'm just going to go with on click for now. So what we're going to do is we're going to set the tab to whatever that's been sent. But in this case, what we'd have is profile, right? And in this case, what we'd have is, just copy and paste this here. In this case, what we'd have is notification. Yeah, so we'd have to introduce those here as well. So we have an active state and its active property rather, and then we have an unclick, right? So I'll just add like the type for these props. All right, so that's basically it. I think I'll take this out into its own interface. So I'll just call this tab, let's say tab props or tab content props. Let's see if that works. All right, so I'll do tab content props, right, with an underscore. And yeah, okay, so they're shared, and that's basically why I'm doing that. I don't want to have to duplicate that. So yeah, when this is active, right, so when prop is active, then we should see the contents, right? Else we shouldn't see anything, right? So currently notifications isn't active, so I'll just basically do the same thing here as well, right? And yeah, we should get like the same results for this. So current we still see profile simply because profile is the current active state there. So what I would do is add the event listeners. So when I click on the profile button, it should call the onClick. It should fire the onClick handler function, and I would also copy this and paste it here as well. All right. Yeah. So I think that basically should be working as expected right now. Although I think I forgot something. So in the last one, we don't have like the active state, so I'll just basically introduce that right now. So whenever the active whenever the data active property is provided, we get like the indicator or the visual cue there. So this is that state is saved from the props that is active. So I would copy that as well and paste it in here. So yeah, I think that, so it's time to give it a test run just to see if it works. If I click on notifications, I see notifications. If I click on profile, I see profile. So we've basically achieved the same thing, result, functionality as the basic, using React portals, right? So what's the benefit? Once again, we have both the buttons and the contents in the same component, right? So we could introduce more pages, right? So I could say add another for, this is preferences, so I think security, right? And say, oh, this is the security page, right? Without having to come and change without making any changes to any significant change to the state we have here, or to this. So all I have to do is reference it, right, and say, oh, we now have a security page, right? And it's just going to take the button portal to the correct place, and it's also going to take the contents and portal to the correct the current target rather. So we have profile, we have notifications, and we have the settings page, all working as expected. So I don't have any content for the settings at the moment, so what I would do is just say hello, or possibly leave a title called change password. All right, sorry about that. Okay, so change password. So yeah, that is in a nutshell. It's not a nutshell. That is how you implement. I get that it can be also quite funny, complex, don't know, but this method looks or feels like cleaner to me than the other simplified method. So there are benefits of using this over the other, and for me it is just having to like put both my buttons and all the several parts that make a whole in its own component, and then just render that component. So when it mounts, it sends every child to the respective positions. Yeah, so, and that's a wrap. If you'd like to see the React Connects API plus the React Portals combo, let me know in the comments below. As always, do not forget to subscribe if you find this tutorial insightful, and I will see you in the next one.